Bava Metziah Daf Zayin. We're holding Daf Zayin on Aleph. My have ale the masusa. Friday Gemara. My have ale the masusa. What is the conclusion about the bathhouse? Yesterday we were discussing about this bathhouse that somebody was mekadesh. The Chachamim separating themselves from this bathhouse. They didn't want to be male begdish. So the question is, what's the halacha? So Tashma come in here, Araya from the conclusion from a Raisa. Rabbi Avin said, "Ava oiv the beit of Chisda, Rav Chisda beit Rav Huna." There's a similar story that was brought before the school of Rav Chisda, and Rav Chisda brought the case before the school of Rav Huna. Upashtem behadar Rav Nachman, and Rav Huna resolved the issue based on which Rav Nachman said. Nachman says, with regard to any property that one cannot recover from the possession of another party by legal process. So, if a person is makdashit while in the possession of the other party, but he's not able to lay tzibur yanim, so the halacha is any kaddish. So the hektish is not valid. So the Gemara now questions Rav Nachman's statement, how yochel lay tzibur yanim? If so, that one can recover the property from another party by legal process, kaddish, then it is kaddish. Afal ga'av the le'afke, even though he has not recovered it. But doesn't Rabbi Yechon say gozel l'nisasha b'ailim? In a case where a person or one robbed another of an item and the owner did not be miyash for retrieving it, neither the owner nor the robber can be makdish it. The robber, because it's not his, and the owner, because it's not in his possession. It's mashma that one cannot makdish even his own item if it's not in his possession. So the Gemara answers, do you think that the masusa we're dealing with over here is a movable bath? We're dealing with the bath. It's in the ground. It's excavated in the ground. Which case, once its owner can recover by legal process, there's no need to take possession. So it's already it exists in his possession. Toner of Tachlifa from the west, Eretz taught this brisa before Rabavo. Shnayim adukim b'talis. If two people are grasping onto a talis. This one takes up to where his hand reaches, and this one takes up to where his hand reaches. And they divide the remainder, the part of the garment that's in the grass, by neither. They divide the remainder equally. So two people are holding on to that talis. This one takes the one, how much he's holding on to, that's how much he takes, and the rest they cholkim b'shova. Machle le Rabavo, like he indicated with the hand, the gesture of his hand, that ubishua, and they should take this with an oath. So the Gemara asks, Elamas Nisan, but then how could you find a case where the halacha in the Mishnah applies? Because you're saying that zat shel the megas. And the rest, they chagum b'shova. But our Mishnah says, the Mishnah teaches they divide the garment between them equally. And it does not teach us that each one takes where his hand receives. So what Papa said, the Mishnah is discussing a case, the tfisa bekar kishasa. Talking on the case where neither of them is grasping the garment itself, but rather they are holding on to the fringes of the garment. Therefore, each one is required to take a shvuah and divide the garment between them. The Misharsha said, Shmami, I learn halacha with regards to the symbolic transfer of a cloth, a sudar, as an act of acquisition from the Papa's statement. Well, the Papa says that the entire cloth need not change hands. Rather, learn from High Sidura. Keeping the toughest b'shalish. Once the recipient of the cloth has grasped 3 by 3 finger breadths of the cloth, which is the minimum size of cloth that can be considered a keli, transaction takes effect. We consider such an action to be the implementation of the pasuk that there says and gave it to his neighbor. In other words, this is a good kinyan. Once it's shalish, it doesn't need to be the command of the pasuk dummy. It's because such an amount of the cloth is significant enough to be considered as though it was severed from the rest of the cloth. And therefore, when the recipient grasps it, it affects the acquisition, even though the rest of the cloth is still in the hand of the other party. He asks the case of Gittin, when the husband places a get in his wife's hand and a string attached to the get remain in his hand, if the husband can still pull a get out of her hand and bring it to him, she's divorced, and if not, he's not able to do so. If the string is too flimsy, then she's divorced. Which is mashma that as long as part of the get remains in his hand, it's not considered as though he gave it to her. Okay, we see by this shalish, it does work. So the answer it says haso krisis by get. The Torah says it has to be a get krisis. It has to be a severance between the husband and the wife, and as long as the husband continues to have some hold of the get, there's no divorce. Hafan nesinabina. But in the case of the cloth, we require an act of giving, and the fact is there's a valid act of giving, even if only part of the cloth remains. Amar Rava says, if the talus was fashioned, the garment was fashioned with gold threads, so how can they divide it? So Umar says, Chita, obviously, why would a gold garment be any different than a regular garment? So my answer says, we're talking about a case, the koi daf-yomi-bava-metziah, a case where the gold is in the middle of the garment, neither one hand nor in the others. So where it says, this too is obvious. The halacha is that they divide the remainder. Where it says, it's not necessary to say this halacha only in a case where the gold is closer to one of them, though it's not in the grasp. So you would say, the one whom the gold is closer can say, divide in this manner, along the middle line in the garment between us, leaving most of the gold in my possession. So therefore, Rava teaches us that divide the gold equally, because my chaz is the pag. Why should you divide it lengthwise? Divide it widthwise, so that the gold be divided equally between us. In the case for two people, a leva and a malva and a leva, are grasping on to a note, a note. And what does this note say? This note says that the malva gave the leva a certain amount of money. Malva imishalihu v'nafam matzasiv. The malva says this note is mine, and the choiv, the debt, has not been repaid, and I dropped it and I found it. The leva says, Shalcho, yes, the note was yours, you lent me money, but I already repaid you back. And you therefore gave me the note. So the halacha is like this, so the note must be ratified through signatories for the creditor to collect the debt. In other words, the Beis Din must first ascertain the validity of the note by verifying that the signatures of the witnesses are authentic. Divrei Rebbe, these are the words of Rebbe. The Iskayim Mashtar, then the Malva can collect. Shimon Gamliel says, Yachleiku. They divide the debt attested in the note. The Malva, the Leva, is chayav to pay only half the amount. Why? Because there's a suffolk as to who's telling the truth. Now, for the Yadayan, if this note fell in the possession of a Dayan, and the two parties do not agree as to which of them it belongs, either to the Leva or the Cheva, or the Malva, the Malva and the Leva have not been, and the Leva has not yet been repaid, or the Leva, and the debt was repaid, so the halacha is Le'yitziu Ulamis. It may never be removed from the Dayan's possession to collect the Chayiv until proof is provided. The note retains its chazaka, and litigants proceed in accordance with its contents. Omar Mar Yiskayim Ashtar B'Chaismuf. Says the master, instead the Brisa said that the note must be ratified through the signatories. The Goveli Malvik Kulei, and does this is a mashma that once it's ratified, the creditor collects the entire debt, less than Mastizen, but doesn't Rabbi Yehuda hold in accordance with the Allah in the Mishnah? Two people holding on to garments. Here too, each party should be entitled to half of the note, and the labor should therefore be obligated to pay half the debt. If the note is ratified, then everyone agrees that the litigants divide, and the labor has to pay at least half the debt. So keep pleading when do they argue when it's not ratified. Rabbi Sava, Rabbi holds that, but made the that when a leva admits what he wrote, the note, the creditor must ratify it in Beis in order to the creditor to collect the debt. And therefore, if he ratifies the notes, and if he ratifies the note in the court, he divides it with the chayv. And if he does not ratify it, he does not divide the debt. If he's unable to ratify the signatures of the witness, he receives nothing, even if the leva admits that he borrowed the money. My time, but what's the reason for Rabbi? Because chasva ba'amlu, he holds an unratified note is merely a shard. Man kom shavale lahishtara, who renders this document a valid note? Leva, this is the leva. The validity of the note is solely dependent on the corroboration of the leva. And how come the priya? And doesn't the leva say that the debt mentioned in the note was repaid? Therefore, the note is worthless unless it is ratified by the witnesses in Beis. Shimon Gamliel says, "Made the b'shtash ksavim yitzar l'kaimi." The creditor is not required to ratify in Beis in order for the creditor to collect the debt. And therefore, even if the creditor does not ratify it, they divide it. If a note fell into possession of the judge, it may never be removed from the possession until proof is provided. What is different about the case where the note fell into the possession of the judge, such that the creditor cannot receive to collect the debt? Or Rabbi says, this is what it means to say. In the case of another individual who has neither the debt nor the creditor, who found the note that already fell into possession of the judge, and it can never be removed. So what is the circumstances? The cost of lay handpick. It's a case where the Beis Din wrote the note, in the case where the Beis Din wrote the note, ratification certifying that it examined and ratified the note, and it can be used to collect the debt. Brisa refers specifically to these circumstances, that is, needless to say, in the case where there's no ratification, and it can be said that he wrote the document because he intended to borrow the money, but he ultimately did not borrow the money, even if they wrote a handpick to Mekuyim, even if it's suspected, so Mekuyim le'yachzer should not return it. We suspect there was repayment. The Gemara discusses the continuation of the Brisa. Rabbi Yossi says, the note retains its presumptive status, and we do not suspect that there was repayment. Does Rabbi Yossi not suspect that there was payment? We learned in the Brisa. If one found a marriage contract in the marketplace, in the case where the husband admits that he has not yet paid the amount written in the contract to his wife, the finder must return the document to the wife. The husband does not admit this, but instead claims that he already paid the ksuba, then we don't return it not to the husband, not to the wife. If says, if the wife is still under the husband, in other words, they're still married, so the one who found the ksuba, the has to return to his wife. The sound in this gash, if it was widowed or divorced, you should not be returned to neither. As perhaps she already received payment and the ksuba was later lost by her husband or the yarshim. In that case, Rabbi S suspects that there was payment. So the Maraz's Eipach reversed the order of the Tanaim and the Bryce and teaches follows. The note fell into the possession of the judge, it can never be removed. Rabbi S retains its chazaka. If so, you have a steer of the Rabbanan. Whereas according to the amended version of the Bryce, the Chacham do not take into account the possibility that the Chay was repaid. In the case of the marriage contract, the Chacham take the possibility into account. So the Gemara says like this: Shtar Ksuba Kolel Rebbeisi. Marriage contract is entirely according to the opinion of Rebbeisi, and Machsuri Mechser Vachitana. And there's no machlekes. Ein habal meida. In case where the husband does not admit that he did not pay the Ksuba, liyasud le'lezav le'lezah. One who found it should not return it to this party or to that party. In what case do we say this? Is where the woman was widowed or divorced. But if she is still under the auspices of her husband, the finder must return it to the wife. Rabbi S says, if she is still under her husband, finder must return it to the wife. Nisawa in his gasha, if she widowed or divorced, you should not return it to this party or to that party. Papa says the actually did not reverse the opinion of the Bryce, but instead revolve the stirazeh. Basically, the Divrim Drabman Komer. Basically, was telling the Chacham that the halacha should be in the case of a ksuba according to their statement, according to their opinion that one who finds a note need not take into account that the chayiv may have been repaid already. So statement should be understood as well. In my opinion, even if she widowed or divorced, we did not suspect that there was payment. But according to your opinion, at least agree to me, that even while she's under the auspices of her husband, the absolute isha, that she returned the document to the wife, as the marriage contract is not subject to payment. Since the husband is not yet liable to pay, it's unlikely that he paid. Chacham said to him in response, even if they are still married, say that he gave her bundles of money. In exchange, she gave him back the ksuba. The finder then returns the marriage contract to the wife. That would enable her to collect the sum twice. Ravina says, rather, reverse the order of the Tanaim of the first brisa. What's the reason of the Rabbanan? We're worried that the husband wrote two ksubas after the first marriage contract was lost. The husband had to write a second ksuba. Returning to the wife the marriage contract that was found would enable her to collect twice. Rabbi S is not worried about shtei ksubas.
Hati.
Rabbi Lezer says machlekes b'shnei madukim b'tevis. Machlekes between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yehuda in the case of the Lev and the Malva, both grasping onto the note. Rabbi Gamliel holds that they divide the note evenly is b'shnei madukim b'tevis. When both are holding on to the standard part of the note, part that contains the standard formulation of the note, which name b'tetiv are both grasping onto the central part of the note, where the names of the creditor and the debtor are written, as well as the amount owed on the date. But if one of them is grasping onto the standard part and the other is grasping onto the central part, zenetel tefis, this one takes the standard part, zenetel tefis, and this one takes the central part. Rabbi Yechon says the ilam cholkin. Actually, they divide everything equally. So the Gemara asks with regard to Rabbi Yechon's statement, does he hold that this is the halacha even when one is grasping the standard part or one is the central part? Why Tanya? We just learned in the price and the magam shel gas. So the Gemara answers like tzricha is the koy teidef Bava-Metziah, where the essential part is located in the middle. He was discussing the case where one was grasping the standard part, the other was grasping the central part. In that case, he would agree that each takes part he was grasping. If so, what are they saying? What that they divide equally? So the Gemara says it's obvious. The Gemara says, in case where the central part of the document is closer to one of them. You would think Hourly plegach, he divided in this manner, leaving the central part on one side. So therefore it teaches us why you see that it led you to divide it that manner. Plegach, he divided in this manner. Rabbi said to Ravina, according to Rabbi who says that this one takes the standard part, this one takes the center part, why do either of them need it? Does he need half the document to cover the opening of the flask? So Amalei said the division in question is not the division of the document itself, with each taking half of the paper. It's the division of the monetary value. It's the value of each section of the note is compared to the value of the other. The one grasping the central part of the note, which contains the date, the Amrachi can say, started Ispezman Kamashava. This note that has the date written on it, how much is it worth? With the less Bezman Kamashava, and consider the note that does not have the date, how much is written? For started Ispezman, the significance of writing a date that if a creditor is in possession of the note that has a date written on it, there you could collect from shibut, from the property. And if the creditor is in possession of the other kind of note, the one that does not have a date written, that he cannot collect in the property. Therefore, the other party who is grasping the standard part of the document gives him the difference of the two values. And also true in general with regard to the case where he said the two litigants divide the disputed item. The references to the monetary value, not the division of the actual item. They tell him, if you don't say this, but rather you hold that the item itself is divided. Two people come to court holding a garment. Do they divide the garment itself into two? But by doing so, they would ruin it. Or so they catch it. It's not difficult. It's possible to explain that they actually cut the garment in two. Because each part receives an item that has monetary value as it's fit to be made into garments for small children.